In the quiet suburb of Ashton, the Chick-fil-A on the corner of Elmwood and 3rd was more than just a fast food restaurant, it was a community hub. Loved by locals for its friendly service and the familiar chime of "My pleasure," the restaurant held its place warmly in the hearts of the town's residents. However, beneath the surface of quick service and waffle fries, a chilling undercurrent was about to disturb the peace. Emily Rogers, a college student working part-time at the restaurant, was the first to notice the odd occurrences. It began subtly. She would find kitchen utensils misplaced, or the storage room light would flicker erratically when she was certain it had been in perfect condition. Initially, she dismissed these happenings as fatigue-induced mistakes due to her juggling studies and work. One stormy evening, as Emily was closing up with her manager, Mr. Thompson, the real terror began. The weather had driven most of the staff home early, leaving only Emily and Mr. Thompson to lock up. The rain pounded against the windows, a stark contrast to the usual serene nights in Ashton. As they were about to exit, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Startled, Emily and Mr. Thompson rushed to investigate, finding a stack of trays scattered across the floor. Mr. Thompson, a rational man in his 50s, assured Emily it was just an accident, likely caused by the trays not being properly stacked. But Emily wasn't convinced. As they resumed their walk to the exit, the overhead lights flickered violently, plunging the restaurant into darkness for a few heartbeats. When the lights returned, Emily saw Mr. Thompson staring at the order counter, pale and silent. Following his gaze, Emily's breath caught in her throat. There, standing at the counter, was a figure, shrouded in shadow, despite the fluorescent lights above. Before either could react, the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Shaken, they decided to leave immediately, dismissing the incident as a trick of the light, or perhaps the storm playing on their nerves. Over the following days, the atmosphere in the Chick-fil-A shifted. Employees reported hearing whispers when alone, feeling sudden drops in temperature, or seeing shadows darting just out of sight. The stories varied, but the fear among the staff grew tangible, an unspoken dread that filled the restaurant. Curious and concerned, Emily decided to dig deeper. She spoke to older employees, searching for any history of the restaurant that might explain the occurrences. That's when she met Donna, a former manager who had worked at the restaurant since its opening. Over a cup of coffee, Donna hesitantly shared a forgotten tragedy. Years ago, before the restaurant was built, the land was an open field, used by local children as a makeshift playground. Tragically, a young boy named Tommy had died in an accident on the site during a particularly harsh winter. His death had been a sorrowful echo in the community, but over time, it was buried beneath layers of new life and new stories, until the restaurant came up. Feeling a chill despite the warm interior of the cafe where they sat, Emily pressed Donna for more details. Donna confessed that strange incidents had occurred from the day they first opened the doors of the Chick-fil-A. Tools would go missing, strange noises would interrupt the quiet, and some even claimed to see a young boy's reflection in the windows at night. Fueled by a mix of fear and determination, Emily decided to confront whatever haunted the Chick-fil-A. She started staying late, documenting her experiences, hoping to find some evidence of Tommy's presence. Night after night, she sat alone, recording video and audio, asking questions into the darkness. Then, one night, everything changed. While reviewing the footage from her latest session, Emily heard a clear, distinct voice. The words were chilling, a whispered, "You see me now, don't you?" The video showed nothing but the empty seats and dimly lit counters, but the voice was undeniable. Emily felt a cold dread settle over her as she realized that she was dealing with something beyond her understanding, something that perhaps did not want to be disturbed. Determined to find answers, Emily prepared to delve deeper into the restaurant's eerie history, unaware that her actions would stir things that perhaps should have been left alone. She felt a personal responsibility to uncover the truth, to perhaps help Tommy find peace, if it was indeed his spirit that wandered the restaurant. As she set up her equipment for another night of investigation, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whispers seemed louder, more coherent, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that her breath fogged in the air. Tonight, she would confront the ghost of Chick-fil-A, and she was not prepared for the horrors that awaited her. Emily set up her equipment meticulously, her hands trembling slightly from both the cold and the creeping dread that settled around her like a cloak. The usual hum of the refrigerators and the soft buzz of the neon sign outside now seemed sinister, as if they were the backdrop to a scene she hadn't agreed to play in. As the clock neared midnight, Emily began her session. "Tommy, if you're here, I'm not here to harm you," she spoke into the darkness, her voice recorder capturing every quiver in her tone. "I just want to understand, to help." The air in the restaurant thickened, the silence deepening so that even the outside storm seemed to pause. Then the whispers started, soft and indistinct, swirling around her like wind. Emily held her breath, straining to catch any words, but they remained just out of reach, teasing and ominous. With her camera recording and her notebook open, Emily continued to speak into the void, asking questions, pleading for a sign. Hours passed, and her eyes grew heavy with the weight of the night. That's when it happened. The temperature in the room plummeted, her breath visible in the icy air, and the whispers abruptly stopped. A loud crash jolted Emily from her drowsy vigil, her heart leaping to her throat as she spun towards the noise. A chair, previously tucked neatly under a table, now lay on its side, several feet away from its original spot. Emily's camera, thankfully still recording, had captured the movement, the chair seemingly having thrown itself across the room. Frozen with fear but driven by a desperate need for answers, Emily approached the chair slowly. As she neared, the air grew colder, and a faint giggle echoed through the restaurant. It was a child's laugh, clear and unmistakably real. Emily's skin crawled with goosebumps, and her breath caught in her chest. She whispered, "Tommy, is that you?" No answer came, but the temperature began to rise back to normal, and the oppressive feeling in the air lightened slightly. Encouraged but still terrified, Emily set the chair back in place and returned to her station. She reviewed the video footage, her hands shaking as she watched the inexplicable movement of the chair. The giggle, though not captured on the audio, was etched into her memory, a haunting melody that she knew she'd never forget. Determined to push further, she replayed the footage, this time focusing on the background, looking for any other anomaly or evidence of a presence. That's when she saw it, a shadow, quick and fleeting, darting across the wall in the background of the footage. It was subtle, but to Emily, it was a sign that she was on the right path. Fueled by a mix of fear and resolve, Emily decided to venture further than ever before. She would access the basement, a place she had avoided until now, rumored among the staff to be the most haunted part of the restaurant. The basement, used for storage and seldom visited at night, was the perfect place for something or someone to hide away. With a heavy flashlight in one hand and her camera in the other, Emily opened the door to the basement. The stairs descended into darkness, the light from the main floor barely piercing the gloom. Taking a deep breath, Emily began her descent, each step creaking ominously under her weight. As she reached the bottom, the air turned musty, filled with the smell of damp and decay. The basement was cluttered with boxes and old restaurant supplies, creating shadows that twisted and flickered in the beam of her flashlight. Emily's heart pounded in her ears as she moved deeper into the basement, her camera recording every step. That's when the whispers returned, louder this time, almost coherent. She spun around, the light from her flashlight darting across the room, catching nothing but the mundane detritus of a fast food restaurant's underbelly. Yet the feeling of being watched, of being not alone, was overwhelming. As she turned back to continue her exploration, she saw it, a figure, small and shadowy, standing at the far end of the basement. It was motionless, silent, and before Emily could react, it vanished as though it had never been there. But the cold spot in the air where it had stood and the lingering sense of sadness were all too real. Emily stood frozen, her mind reeling. Was Tommy reaching out to her, or was she digging into something far deeper, more ancient than she could have ever imagined? The basement, with its chilling presence and whispering shadows, seemed to hold the answers she sought. But as she ventured further into the darkness, she wondered if some secrets were better left undiscovered. Emily stood still for several long moments, her breath fogging in the cold air of the basement, her heart hammering against her ribs. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder from the storm that continued to rage outside. Steeling herself, she began to move again, the beam from her flashlight sweeping over stacks of boxes and old equipment. As she ventured deeper into the basement, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being drawn further into a web from which there might be no escape. Every shadow seemed to watch her, every whisper felt like a call deeper into the darkness. She passed under a flickering light bulb, which cast an eerie, stuttering glow over a corner filled with old, dusty banners and promotional materials from years past. Suddenly, the light bulb above her exploded with a sharp pop, showering Emily with a cascade of sparks and glass. She cried out, instinctively shielding her face with her arms. When she looked up again, the basement was thrown into near-complete darkness, illuminated only by her flashlight. Her heart pounding, Emily forced herself to move forward, her breath shallow and rapid. She came to an old, metal filing cabinet that stood ajar, its drawers filled with forgotten administrative papers and faded employee records. On impulse, she pulled open the top drawer more fully. Inside, she found a small, worn leather-bound book buried beneath the paperwork. Curious despite her fear, Emily picked up the book and flipped it open. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with neat, looping handwriting. It was a journal, dating back several decades, seemingly belonging to one of the restaurant's original owners. As she skimmed the entries, a particular passage caught her eye, October the 14th, 1972. Strange occurrences continued to unsettle the crew. Objects move of their own accord, and cold drafts sweep through the kitchen despite no windows being open. I started to see him, the boy they all talk about. He appears in reflections, in corners of rooms, always watching, never speaking. I fear this place is haunted by more than just our imaginations. Emily's hands trembled as she held the journal, the reality of the restaurant's long history of hauntings sinking in. It wasn't just urban legends, there was something truly unexplained, possibly sinister, about the place. Placing the journal carefully back in the drawer, she continued her exploration, her senses heightened to every sound and movement in the darkness. As she rounded a cluster of shelves, she nearly tripped over something on the floor. Pointing her flashlight downward, she discovered an old doll, its porcelain face cracked and one eye missing, staring up at her blankly. The sight of the doll, lying forgotten in the dust, sent a new wave of terror through her. Emily backed away, her breath coming in quick gasps. As she did, her foot bumped against something solid. She aimed her flashlight at it and revealed an old wooden chest. Her curiosity piqued despite her fear, Emily crouched down and opened the chest. Inside, she found a collection of children's toys and books, all covered in a thick layer of dust. Among them was a photo album. Opening it, Emily found it filled with black and white photos of children playing, their faces blurred and indistinct. The last photo, however, was different. It was a picture of the restaurant, taken soon after it had opened, and standing in front of it was a boy. His image was clearer than the others, his solemn face staring directly into the camera, his eyes seeming to pierce through time itself. Feeling a sudden chill, Emily slammed the album shut and stood, her mind racing. The whispers began again, louder this time, almost like sighs. She shone her flashlight around the basement desperately, the light beam dancing over the walls. That's when she saw it, a shadowy figure, small and slight, standing at the far end of the basement. It was unmoving, watching her. Emily froze, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. The figure didn't speak, it didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to convey a deep, mournful sadness. As Emily watched, paralyzed with fear, the figure slowly faded away, leaving her alone in the chilling silence of the basement. She knew then that she couldn't leave, not yet. She needed answers, not just for herself, but for the spirit that haunted the restaurant. What did it want? Why was it bound to this place? With a newfound resolve, Emily prepared to delve deeper into the history of the restaurant and the land it stood on, unaware of the secrets still buried in the dark, waiting to be uncovered. Emily, now driven by a blend of fear and determination, ascended from the basement with the old photo album clutched tightly in her hand. Her mind was racing with thoughts of the boy in the photograph. Could he be the ghost of Tommy, the child who had died on this land before the Chick-fil-A was built? She resolved to find more about him, believing that understanding his story might be key to resolving the disturbances. The next day, after a restless night haunted by images of the boy's solemn face, Emily visited the local library. She pored over old newspapers and public records, searching for any mention of the boy or the accident. Hours slipped by until she finally came across an old article in the Ashton Gazette. It detailed a tragic accident where a young boy, Thomas Wilkes, had died in a sledding accident on the very plot where the restaurant now stood. The article mentioned his family's profound grief and the community's efforts to support them, a story of a life cut tragically short and a family left to pick up the pieces. Armed with this new information, Emily returned to the restaurant, her mission clear. She felt a deep sympathy for Tommy, understanding now that his presence in the restaurant was perhaps a manifestation of unresolved trauma and attachment to the place where he had last felt happiness and life. Determined to help Tommy find peace, Emily decided to reach out to his spirit directly. That night, after the restaurant closed, she set up a small memorial in the basement where she had found the toys and photo album. She lit a candle and placed it next to a picture of Tommy she had printed from the newspaper archive. Sitting in front of the makeshift memorial, Emily spoke softly into the dimly lit room. "Tommy, I know what happened to you was unfair and tragic. I'm so sorry for your loss and your pain. But you're not forgotten. I see you and I acknowledge your story. It's time for you to find peace, to move on from this place where you've been held for so long." The air around her grew cold, and the whispers started again, this time softer, almost like a sigh of relief. A faint light appeared near the memorial, growing brighter, then dimmer, pulsing gently like a calm heartbeat. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mix of sadness and relief, as if Tommy was communicating a heartfelt goodbye. After several minutes, the light faded, and the room warmed again. The oppressive atmosphere that had lingered in the basement seemed to lift, replaced by a feeling of calm and stillness. Emily sat for a long while, reflecting on the night's events, feeling a profound sense of having done something truly meaningful. As days turned into weeks, the strange occurrences in the Chick-fil-A ceased. The staff reported a noticeable change in the atmosphere, and even the customers seemed to feel more at ease. Emily knew she couldn't share her experiences without sounding unbelievable, so she kept the details to herself, content in the knowledge that she had helped a lost soul find peace. However, the resolution of Tommy's story was only the beginning for Emily. She realized that her ability to connect with the supernatural could be a calling, a way to help other spirits who were trapped and restless. Her experience at the Chick-fil-A had opened a door she was now ready to step through, ready to explore what lay beyond in the shadows and whispers of other haunted places. So, while the Chick-fil-A on Elmwood and 3rd returned to normal, for Emily, a new chapter was just beginning. A chapter filled with mysteries to solve, spirits to appease, and paranormal boundaries to explore. She was no longer just a college student working a part-time job. She was a mediator between the living and the dead, a seeker of truths hidden in the darkness. As the calm returned to the Chick-fil-A on Elmwood and 3rd, Emily felt a profound shift within herself. The restaurant resumed its bustling activity, its patrons oblivious to the layers of history that had just been reconciled beneath their feet. Emily, however, could not forget. The encounters with the unseen had changed her, had opened her eyes to the thin veils between past and present, between sorrow and peace. With Tommy's spirit finally at rest, the whispers that had once filled the corners of the restaurant with chilling sounds were now silent. The cold spots had warmed, and the shadowy figures had dissolved into nothingness. Yet, the resolution of Tommy's unrest was not merely an end but a beginning for Emily. It had ignited a spark within her, a calling to explore the unseen and help those who were unable to find their way to peace. One late evening, as she locked up the restaurant for the last time before heading back to college, Emily took a moment to stand by the door, looking back at the interior bathed in the soft glow of the overhead lights. It looked just like any other fast food restaurant to anyone passing by, but to her, it was a landmark of her journey into the unknown. As she turned off the lights and stepped out, the night air felt different, charged with a sense of purpose. Emily knew that her life was about to change, that her encounter at Chick-fil-A was only the first step on a long path that would likely lead her into deeper, darker places. Armed with the knowledge that she could make a difference, Emily decided to delve deeper into the study of the paranormal, to understand and perhaps bridge the gaps between the living and the spirit seeking solace. She enrolled in courses in history and parapsychology, each subject bringing her closer to the mysteries she yearned to unravel. As she drove away from the Chick-fil-A for the last time, Emily felt a mix of nostalgia and excitement. The restaurant had been a part of her life for years, but now it was a symbol of her new mission. In the rearview mirror, the lights of the restaurant faded into the distance, becoming just another part of the landscape she was leaving behind. The road ahead was uncertain and surely fraught with challenges and dangers. However, Emily was resolute. Her experience had shown her that even the most ordinary places could hold extraordinary secrets, and that within every whisper of the past, there was a story waiting to be told. She smiled to herself, feeling the weight of her responsibility, but also the thrill of her new calling. The night stretched out before her, full of shadows and whispers, but Emily was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to continue her journey into the unknown, helping those who were lost to find their way home. And so, as the last lights of Ashton faded behind her, Emily drove into the darkness, ready to confront whatever mysteries it held. Her journey through the shadows had just begun, a journey that promised not only to unveil the secrets of the otherworldly but also to define the very essence of her being. This was not the end but the beginning of a story that would stretch into the depths of the unknown, where every shadow whispered a new mystery, and every light promised revelation. Emily's adventure into the paranormal was just beginning, and the road ahead was limitless.